Welcome back to EWTN News In Depth. Jimmy Lai is one of many behind bars after taking part in pro-democracy demonstrations in the summer of 2019. Protests and marches took place across Hong Kong that year in the wake of the Chinese Communist Party's novel extradition bill. It allowed Hong Kong to detain and transfer people to mainland China. Critics argued the law eroded Hong Kong's judicial independence and exposed the former British colony to China's flawed justice system. Lai was accused of organizing the protests, which drew hundreds of thousands of people. As those protests grew, so did the attention from the international community. World leaders were concerned about civil liberties being chipped away, including freedom of the press. In an effort to stamp out the pro-democracy demonstrations, China quickly imposed a new national security law, which vaguely defined crimes such as secession and foreign interference. The Hong Kong police charged Lai under that law for allegedly colluding with foreign forces, but didn't specify how. They also charged him with fraud related to his business offices. Lai, who founded media company Next Digital, published Apple Daily, one of the few independent pro-democracy news outlets in Hong Kong. Police raided the newspaper's newsroom and froze $18 million of assets over the summer. The paper printed its last issue in June, a huge blow to freedom of the press in Hong Kong. Lai stood by his newspaper's role in supporting democracy. And on December 8th, Lai, a devout Catholic, will turn 74 behind bars. Lai is just one of at least 100 people arrested under the national security law. To give us perspective on the international repercussions China's ever-tightening grip on Hong Kong is having, we're joined by Mark Clifford, president for the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong, who worked alongside Jimmy Lai at Apple Daily, and Father Robert Sirico, president emeritus of the Acton Institute and priest of the Grand Rapids Diocese. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Mark, you have firsthand knowledge of what Jimmy Lai was building with his media empire. What was it like working alongside him as a journalist and manager?
Well, he's an extraordinary guy, and as your wonderful introduction showed, I mean, he's a very, very brave man. Here's a person of almost unlimited resources. He could have moved to one of his apartments or houses in other countries around the world, and he chose to stay with the people of Hong Kong. This is a city that gave him everything. He arrived as a 12-year-old penniless immigrant, worked his way up, and after the 1989 killings in Tiananmen in Beijing, he decided that Hong Kong democracy, rule of law, freedoms were something that needed to be protected. And he founded Apple Daily, and he's one of the bravest people that I've ever met. And as you say, a year today, he's been in jail. He's about to celebrate his birthday in jail. He's chosen this fate for himself. He could have run. He didn't. He's an amazing guy, and I thank you for shining a spotlight on him.
An example for all of us. Father Sirico, your defense of human rights and economic freedom led you to Jimmy Lai's story. What can you tell us and tell our viewers about the state of freedom in China and Hong Kong?
Well, it's at a very low ebb right now, and of course, Jimmy's imprisonment is an example of that, along with many other people who are in prison right now. The restrictions on people's freedom goes across the board, not just Catholics, not just business people, but the Uyghurs in China. And you saw what happened to this young tennis player for simply calling out the kind of sexual abuse that was heaped upon her by a member of the high-ranking member of the Communist Party. This is a very dismal moment. I'd like to underscore the Chineseness of Jimmy Lai. This is a man who loves his homeland, who almost tears up when he speaks about China. He loves Chinese art. He loves Chinese music and Chinese food. This is not a battle between the West and China. It is a battle between Chinese people and the communist government, and that needs to be understood by everyone, including people on the mainland.
That's a fantastic point to make. Mark, you were a director of Next Digital, the parent company of Lai's Apple Daily. Who were the five jailed in the raid, and are they still serving sentences?
Well, we have 7 people from our company who are in jail right now, and interestingly, only Jimmy Lai has actually been convicted of anything. So it's a great question. Are they serving sentences? No, because they haven't actually gone to trial, but they're seen as too dangerous to be let out. So Jimmy was convicted on some rather minor peaceful assembly charges, and it's worth underscoring. Here's a man who his entire life has preached nonviolence, and he's being thrown in jail. He's manacled. He's put in heavy chains every time he's brought out into a public appearance in court, because there's an attempt to humiliate him, to ritually debase him, to show others what could happen to even a wealthy, powerful person like Jimmy Lai. Our chief executive officer was let off last June. Haven't seen him. He hasn't been free since then. He's been in court appearances. Our editor-in-chief and several other editorial writers. There are other people who've been arrested, including two of Jimmy's sons, on national security law charges, and our former chief operating officer. So it's extraordinary. You have 7 people from a newspaper in jail, several others affiliated or associated with the family or with the newspaper facing some very serious charges. So it's almost unbelievable that you can just hold people effectively a life sentence before even putting them up on trial. And as you mentioned in your introduction, we don't even know what Jimmy Lai is supposedly is guilty of. None of the other people have been provided with any evidence against them. So these national security law charges are just completely bogus.
No details and no due process. Father Sirico, Lai's entrepreneurial pursuits were grounded in an understanding of the virtue of work and the free market. Why is it important for Catholics to understand the perils of unchecked government power?
Well, because what it does is it assaults the dignity of the human person, who is a being that is creative. We're called to participate in the creation of this world by God himself. You should mention here, especially on EWTN, that Jimmy Lai is a Catholic convert, a friend of the great and brave Cardinal Zen. When you see the person of Jimmy Lai, what you have encapsulated here is the struggle for freedom across the board, the freedom of enterprise, the freedom of assembly, the freedom of speech, the freedom of conscience, the freedom of religion. And in his one person, we see the attack of communism on all of those freedoms, that no one will be free until all of these freedoms are granted by the Chinese government.
And how is enterprise and economic freedom such an important part of his story?
Well, as Mark has already mentioned, this man came to Hong Kong in poverty on a Chinese junk, and began to build little by little his own talent pool and his enterprises. This is human flourishing. This is the human person who mixes his intelligence and his talents with the material world and creates wealth and opportunity for thousands and thousands of other people. China had a brief period of time where that became evident, the possibility of that. And now under this president, this dictator, we see these freedoms being disregarded once again in the model of Mao.
Right, that's the rule of Xi Jinping. Mark, what comes next for Lai and his case? And do you know anything about his health?
Well, we do hear indirectly through his lawyers and through letters to his friends that he's holding up quite well. I've received several letters from him, but I've chosen not to be in further communication with him because of this vague national security law where anything can be used against someone. But I think that his faith, as Father Sirico said, he's a convert. He's buoyed by his faith and his wife and his friends, and he's chosen this burden. And I think he's holding up mentally quite well. Physically, well, as you say, he's about to celebrate his 74th birthday in prison, so that can't be a happy occurrence. But he has so many legal cases that we could spend the rest of the program just talking about them. And I think it's fair to say that as long as Xi Jinping wants him to be in jail and wants to try to destroy Jimmy Lai as that very symbol of freedom that Father Sirico so eloquently mentioned, he'll be in jail. This is not about due process. This is not about rule of law. It's about lawfare. It's about using law to reach predetermined political ends.
Well, Father Sirico, we have time for one more question. I want to note one thing about the power of the media. Your team at the Acton Institute is working on a second documentary on Lai's life and his current struggle. Let's take a quick look at a part of the trailer.
Mr. Lai insisted on marching in front where the authorities could see him.
I've been arrested 3 times.
The Hong Kong police raided the Apple Daily compound.
It's very likely that, I will have to go to prison.
He chose to stay in Hong Kong.
Their house is firebombed.
All I had, this place gave me.
I watched this man willingly give up the life of a billionaire to become a dissident.
Jimmy Lai has chosen to specifically stand for something that he believes in. Father Sirico, why is that so important to share?
It's important to share because it's an inspiration to everyone, and we hope that it'll be an inspiration to the Chinese people themselves. We hope to deliver this documentary in time for the Olympics that will take place in mainland China so that the whole world can see what this government is doing to their own people.
Well, we've been covering the controversy of the Olympics and what's going on with the Chinese government and the Uyghur Muslims. So thank you both. I know all of us are praying for Jimmy Lai and his family.
Thank you.